Welcome, everyone. My name is Jen Hicks. I'm the Director of Communications and Outreach with Maine Woodland Owners. And today our program is legislative updates with Tom Doak. Maine Woodland Owners is the only statewide organization that conducts programs and provides resources and information for small woodland owners in the state of Maine. And I think most of you are members, but if you're not a member, we would love to have you join us. You get an annual membership, or basic membership's $45. You get a monthly newsletter, you get updates, information, access to our resources and resource people. And it gives us a chance to know who's out there to give the support that's needed to manage woodlands in a healthy way. So today we have I'm sure everybody knows our Executive Director, Tom Doak. He has been our Executive Director for almost 20 years, probably 18 now. And before that was the State Forester for the state of Maine. And so has been very engaged with policy and legislative matters around woodlands and woodlots and woodland owners. He writes in our newsletter almost every month during the legislative session and keeps everyone as updated as possible. These programs are also part of that process of keeping our members updated. So we're very grateful to have everybody here. The format of today's program is going to be, Tom's has some information to provide, but he's very interested in having your questions and any productive conversation that we may want to have around some of the bills in the legislature that are being debated at this point. You also can be updated by going to our website. We keep the legislative action page up to date during this time of year. So we have testimony, bills, bill descriptions, our positions on bills, all on our legislative action webpage. You go to mainewoodlandowners.org, you'll find on the homepage a button you click to get to that page. So if you don't catch everything today, or if you'd like to know more, please feel free to go to that website after. Okay, I think that's all I've got as far as how we're going to manage dialogue. The chat box is a great way to ask questions. If you need clarification while Tom is presenting, please, you may turn on your video, raise your hand, or click on the reaction button, and there's a hand raise. You can raise your hand by clicking on the button raise hand, or jump in if it's a quick clarification that you need. But I believe we're going to hold big questions for the end. Is that correct, Tom?
I think as we go, if you have something on a particular bill that you need, if you just raise your hand, maybe, and we'll watch for that, we can figure out maybe as we go. Jen, how's that?
Sure, that's fine with me. I'll keep an eye out for people's hands, Tom. Okay. So I'll let you know, and I'll be keeping track of the chat box, so people can, I will let you know if anything's coming through, and you can address it.
Okay, great.
Great, thank you, Tom, and the floor is yours.
I also want to, in addition to Jen, we have Carla Black, who's our new Deputy Executive Director, who also does legislative work with us. So she's on and can answer questions and is engaged at the legislature too. I want to recognize, I see Representative Jim Boyle. Jim, nice to see you, Jim. Jim's back in the legislature. So I appreciate you sitting in, Jim. You can correct me, I think, on anything if I misstep here.
Okay.
Okay, I've known Jim a very long time, so it's nice. Jim has always been a good help in the legislature, to be honest with you. So
I tell people Jimmy Carter was in office when Tom and I met, so that gives you any indication.
Okay,
that Trump had red hair.
Thank you for that. Yeah. So I have 9 different bills to talk about, so I'll go through them. We can spend as much time. A couple of them will be very quick. A couple will probably be fairly lengthy. But I'm just gonna. I have no particular order, but this is our sheet that Carla produces, and it's color coded by committee, and I'm just going to kind of go down the list in the order that I have. So the first one I want to talk about is, and I'll give you the LD numbers if you need them. LD 770, which is an act to apply civil trespass to hunting dogs. This was a bill held over from last year. And the issue is held over from the last session to be discussed again this year. This one is about issues that landowners are having with people, and primarily hounds that are chasing game onto their land, or dogs running loose on their land, and they don't want those dogs. This is primarily in Maine. There's a leash law, but there's an exemption in the statute for dogs used in hunting. Most dogs used in hunting are not an issue, but they're the ones that are hounding, that are chasing game, and those primarily after the issues really are mostly around coyotes and bears. There are people that have had some very unpleasant interactions with people that are hounders. Most of the hounders have not been an issue, but there have been a bunch. There have been issues about people that said, "Do not let your dog go on my land." And the hounders or the people will actually let the dogs go right in front of the landowner after they're told not to. There's nothing illegal about it. So that's the kind of situation they're trying to address in some fashion. So there's been a lot of discussion. There was a group work met over the fall, created by the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, and to address this issue. And I think I don't think it's not finalized. Is it, Carla? I don't think.
The new bill?
Yeah,
Yes,
the new bill is, but it hasn't. But we haven't. It's not enacted yet.
No, and the hearing is later this month.
Yep. So I think where this is going to turn out is if you're hounding using obviously dogs that are for coyotes, bear, I think it's raccoons, and maybe bobcat, but really it's bear and coyote. That you cannot purposely turn a dog loose on posted land or land that you know that the landowner doesn't want you. So that will be a violation. The second one is if in 365, if you are found on land that a landowner has told you you're not wanted with your dogs, and an law enforcement officer tells you you cannot come back, then if you come back within the next 365 days, if your dogs are back within 365 days, that's also a violation. I think that's where the bill, those are the basic parts of the bill. I think that's where it will likely go. As I say, most of these issues are not rising to the issue of where it has to be a law enforcement officer involved, but it's clear that this issue isn't going to get resolved until the legislature takes some additional action. I believe this group that worked on it, there's a kind of a unanimous sense that this has to be addressed, and I'm thinking that will likely be the way it goes. So if you don't have problems with dogs running on your land, you may not care about this bill, but it is, if nothing else, it's a recognition that landowners, there are issues for landowners that need to be addressed, and the legislature is willing to do it. So. Anything on that? I bet the next one will probably have a little more. Oh, Tom Allen. You're muted, Tom. There you go.
I just had a quick question, because in our place in Sebago, we've got this issue. I don't remember they've been on our land exactly, but they could have been. So I'm wondering what kind of notice would suffice, and this probably may not occur in the course of the bill, but something like a no hounding sign. I mean, is it as opposed to a no trespassing sign?
Yeah, it could be anything. It could be if the land is posted, or the landowner has indicated to the person who handles the dogs that dogs are not allowed. You may not release them on the land, or clearly with knowing that they will go there. Like, well, I didn't let them go. I let them go on the road and they ran onto your land. Well, that's a violation. So that would be the issue. If they're found there, then a law enforcement officer, the trigger of the 365 days you can't come back without is a law enforcement officer must be involved and tell the person, do not come back. If your dogs are back, regardless of whether you intended to or not, and the landowner wants to prohibit, has fined you and wants to action taken, then you are subject to it. The person will be subject to a violation.
Yeah, I take the point. I just worry that it's going to be pretty hard to give notice to the guides who are using these dogs unless you can just put up a sign.
Right, you're right. I mean, but the committee had some very specific, they had some legislators, some landowners that talked about, being right there, telling the person in person,
Mhm.
do not do this. And they kept coming back and they said, and I'll be back tomorrow, to telling the landowner. And in that case, that would be a clear violation. It's no different than the trespass laws that say, posted land or reasonably knew that you weren't allowed. You can tell somebody, if it's the test is, did that person really know they weren't supposed to be there? And so my guess is most of the cases that are really egregious, there probably no trespassing signs.
Okay.
That's my guess. Anything else on that one? So the next one on the list is Sunday hunting. That one might get a few more comments. There were 4 bills in the legislature last session dealing with Sunday hunting, and 4 different proposals. We have, I think you probably, if you're a member, we've always opposed Sunday hunting. We're not imposing hunting. We own 76 parcels of land. 75 of them are open for hunting. One is not because of a deed restriction. But we've heard loud and clear from our members that they want one day. They were happy to support hunting, but they want that one day to enjoy their property. This has gone, I've lost track. It's like 28 times in the last 35 years it's been proposed and defeated. This year, there's been a significant push from out-of-state organizations to try to pass this. There are 3 out-of-state organizations that are pushing it. It isn't coming from the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine. The push is coming from national groups that think that people in hunters in Maine are disadvantaged. The bill that has got the most traction was one that said you can hunt on your own land or with written permission if you get written permission from the landowner on Sunday. Even the Sportsman's Alliance didn't want that one because that gets into the permission issue. In Maine, it's unlike most other states, you don't have to have permission to be on someone's land to hunt. The burden is on the landowner. If you don't want hunting, the burden is on the landowner to indicate that they don't want the hunter, whether it's verbally or posted signs, which is different than most places. So, but that was the proposal. That was the one that's been pushed pretty hard. The Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Department has opposed the bill, has opposed the issue, but there are significant resources being used against on this. The committee killed off all 4 bills, but then passed a resolve directing the Fish and Wildlife Department to poll Maine citizens on their opinions. And I was questioned, every group that testified against the bills were questioned whether they had a poll of their members. And how do you know you represent your members? And I said, I've been doing this 18 years and I've dealt with this for 18 years. And not every member is going to be opposed, but I think I know how to represent our membership and on this issue. But so there was so we never fully polled them, but the most raucous hearing I've ever been involved in 18 years was the last big push on Sunday hunting. And I've never quite seen a hearing like that was stacked with people who were opposed, and it went on for hours. Anyway, so this poll is being conducted by an independent firm. It's looking at landowners, general public, and hunters, and assessing them. And It's a random poll. I know Richard Nass is on. Richard said that he happened to be one of the ones that showed up in the random sample. The poll is supposed to be ready next week sometime. The group that I'm on that worked on the questions and things with this polling group is going to meet next week and hopefully see the results. But this will be, I anticipating a pretty significant fight again in the legislature.
Can I comment on the poll?
Sure.
It was pretty obvious to me what it was when they called, but I have to tell you, it was very confusing. By the end of it, it was fairly lengthy, 15 minutes and 15, 20 minutes. So sorting that out from the everyday calls that we get was interesting. And then at the end of the poll, I did not understand the questions basically. And so I was basically, my fallback position was I was opposed to Sunday hunting, but I wasn't quite sure what answers I was given, what side they were on. It was extremely confusing. And so I don't know what the results of this poll are going to be, but it didn't sound very good to me.
Richard, I hope when the bill comes up, you'll actually get up, testify and say you were one of the folks that end up randomly and that you were opposed, but
Yeah,
you found it really confusing. I was trying to.
I knew what was happening, so I knew what I was participating in, but the questions were not clear to me. And so, as I said, my fallback position was just make it clear that I was opposed to Sunday question. I'm not sure how I was even recorded as far as the poll goes.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
So the issue on hunting on your own land is that, one of the issues that came up was, well, what about the person who doesn't own land? The game is owned by everybody. Do you want to set up a system in Maine that landowners have more access, more rights to hunt, more rights to game than non-landowners? Is this back to the landowner gentry that can decide who gets access to game? And that is an argument that a lot of people, non-landowner hunters say, wait a minute, what about me? I know I have a buddy. If I don't have a buddy, then how do I get access? And then the other issue, the permission part makes it a lot easier to charge. I mean, some landowners want to charge, but in Maine, it's very rare that you charge for hunting access, but in most states you do. And once you start down a road of a permission, then it's much easier to grant permission and charge. So I don't know where this will go. I see Jim, I see your hand up. Jim Boyle.
Yes, thanks. Two parts. One is, did the IF&W actually commission the study? Is that who paid for this? Or okay.
Yes, they hired a firm that they've used before on wildlife management issues, and they've done polling all over the country. Yes.
And then second, if I may, so there were 4 bills, all of them went away, and then there was this resolve. What's the status in the legislature or in the committee now?
So the resolve required the department to do this work, report back the polling information. And it gives the committee the right to put a bill, to produce a bill if they choose. They could choose not to. And that would be the end of it, because there's no actual bill in front of the legislature right now directly on Sunday hunting. It would have to be, you're familiar, Billy, Jim, you've seen there are a whole bunch of resolves, and they have to go get the legislature to authorize a bill, and it comes back. But that's the status. That's the status of it. It's just right now what happens when the poll comes back, and then what the Fish and Wildlife Committee wants to do with the information they receive. The other proposals were, one of them was Northern Maine. You can hunt on Sunday in Northern Maine. The large landowners are the people that are opposed to the bill. The Farm Bureau, us, the Maine Professional Guides has opposed it. ATV Maine has opposed it. The department, Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Department, opposed it. The Landowner Relations Advisory Board that advises the Commissioner of IONW is opposed. I'm trying to think of others. And the Sportsman's Alliance of Maine on the issue of landowner permission. they did not testify on that bill because they didn't want the permission. But I think it's going to be kind of a messy situation coming. Any questions or comments or people? Every once in a while, I do hear from some people that believe we have the wrong position. I will say, if you're a member, and we have your email address, you're gonna be getting a poll from us in the next couple of days with a few questions in it. We've taken a couple of the questions out of the survey, not the whole survey, right? But just to reaffirm where our membership is. I'm happy to hear other points of view or concerns, or certainly if you want, you will be notified by us when there's an opportunity to testify, if you were or whatever your position is. So questions or thoughts or comments or. Okay, usually it's a pretty heated, I've had some nice, I've had a couple of, I have one guy that called me up and he wasn't a member, but he told me that everybody could go on his land except me. And I wasn't welcome on his land, and I don't really want to go on his land, so it's okay. But I told him he could still go on our lands and my personal property. So next one is the right to practice forestry. I see David Irving. David, you're probably going to care about this one, I would bet. Maybe some others. The issue here is this, again, a holdover bill. The issue is local restrictions and regulations that prohibit harvesting or make it so that it's not practical. That's the genesis of the bill. It was held over. A group was created by ACE, the Maine Forest Service. I served on that one too. There is already a law. When I was director of the Forest Service, there's a law put in place that requires the municipality to. It doesn't preempt the municipality from creating a forestry ordinance, but it sets out a very specific process, and it requires a consultation with the Maine Forest Service. It requires that any ordinance being developed, but with the assistance of a licensed forester. It requires a public meeting to discuss it in the town, at which the Maine Forest Service must be allowed to participate, and it requires submitting to the Forest Service any final version. The reality of what it is that there are many, many ordinances that have never gone through that process, and the towns have either ignored it or didn't know the requirements were there. So there's a lot of forestry ordinances, frankly, in Maine that probably are not legally adopted, but landowners have been obligated to follow them. I think what's going to come out of this issue is it's going to create a system that says the towns must go back through. Any town that has an ordinance that has not gone through that process must do it and must follow all the requirements, and must certify back to the Forest Service that the requirements are met by a certain date, or the legislation will wipe that local ordinance out. So it will take that ordinance away. And there's a couple of other, and it also proposes to make the Maine Forest Service the repository of any local ordinance. So if it's not on the Forest Service website as a forestry ordinance, even if it's adopted by the standard, it wouldn't meet this. It is not legally adopted and enforceable unless the Forest Service has it on their website as the ordinance. So they would be the official keeper of the list. So you can, if you're in a town as a landowner or a forester and want to know if there's a local ordinance, you can go to that website. If there's no ordinance listed in the Forest Service website, there is no forestry ordinance outside of state regulations. So I think that's where it's going to go. There seems to be an agreement on that issue. I think it's a good thing. It's unclear what happens to the laws that are in place that already are probably not legally adopted. But there's I think maybe a 3-year window for municipalities to to review them and bring them into compliance, or as I say, they will not be enforceable after that. Questions on that? Jim?
Because I'm taking notes, can you give me the LD number?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I should on any of them.
Most people don't care, but I gotta have that to find these things.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's 1407.
And is it current in, it's not been, it's not a resolve, it's not held over, it's current?
Trying to remember, that's not a resolve, is it?
It was a resolve with the
It was.
report back. So I think it's
Okay.
in a similar posture to the Sunday hunting.
Yeah.
That I haven't seen a new bill come out of the committee with that, on that issue yet.
So Jim, I think you can track it with 1407, but
Yes.
yeah. And the Sunday hunting one that is likely to be referenced is 1033.
Okay,
Even
and
though
then
that- Go ahead.
second part is, were there concerns raised by Maine Municipal Association or others about this being a state mandate? Anything like that, where it's gonna cost the towns money?
The town, Maine Municipal participated in all the discussions. And I think the issue is they are aware that there are ordinances that are probably not legally adopted. And so, I don't know that it's going to be a mandate, because you don't have to do anything. If you don't do anything and you have an ordinance, in 3 years, you won't have an ordinance, basically. So nobody's requiring action. You don't have to do anything. But if you don't, you're out. And so I don't think that's going to trigger the mandate. Yeah, that would, Jim, you can argue that if you need to in when it comes up. I'm glad to see you back, Jim. So anything else on that one? Next one is LD 1513. That was a holdover. And that has to do with discontinued abandoned roads. One of my favorites. The short version is the bill originally would have required a municipality to maintain a public easement on a discontinued abandoned road if there was a dwelling, a residence on it. Well, that was not going to go anywhere. But the legislature, the state and local government committee, knew there were these issues and held the bill over and created a subgroup to work on it. And they allowed 3 of us to work with the subgroup. It was me, it was a woman named Roberta Manto from Maine Roadways, which is an association of people that are having issues with roads, and Rebecca Graham from Maine Municipal Association. The 3 of us could not agree on any particular approach, and neither could the subcommittee. It's a pretty complicated issue, but so the subcommittee came up with a recommendation to create a commission, a discontinued abandoned roads commission, and gave the commission very specific charges, and that would make recommendations on any issue that resolved to the legislature on issues around these roads. The hearing was this week on it. I spoke in favor of it. It is at least a step forward. It isn't necessarily what I would like automatically to have happen, but it went out of the committee, it voted unanimously out of the committee out to pass. The question is, who's going to staff this commission? Because it would be a permanent commission. Carla came up with a really good idea, and I was the one who now have been blamed for it, to possibly use OPLA staff in the off season to do it. OPLA, this is the policy. Jim and Tom Allen, I'm sure, and Richard and others know. It's the staff that provides the legislative, nonpartisan staff that provides the support to the legislative committees. They support the committees during the session, but off session they may have time. So, and there are other commissions that operate this way. So that the recommendation out of the committee was to use to have the commission meet off, not when the legislature's meeting, and have OPLA staff it. I think it will probably go through the legislature, whether there's a fiscal note or something, or it gets tied up on that, I don't know. But there is a slot on the, they're appointed by, the members are appointed by the speaker, the president, and the governor. And there is a spot that says a statewide woodland owner organization will have a representative on it. So that was aimed at us. So I'm assuming if it passes, we'll have somebody on it. So, anything on that one? Okay, ATVs. It was a 3-year effort, but there was a bill finally enacted last session that restricted the size of ATVs for what you can register. And the sizes, or you can, going forward after January 1st of this year, unless you have either registered it or purchased it and not received delivery of it yet, but you have purchased it, you cannot register an ATV that is greater than 65 inches in width or greater in weight than 2,000 pounds. You can use any, you don't have to register a ATV that you use on your own land, or if it's used only on ice, on the lakes, on frozen lakes. But so you can use anything. You can use anything or any, but anybody who is currently owns one of these or has purchased one is grandfathered and may register them, continue until they're gone, and actually can sell them to somebody and they can register. So they're completely grandfathered. This was only going forward for anybody after January 1st. That was quite a compromise. I was on a group, there were 14 of us. We spent 7 full days of meetings to deal with the issues around ATVs. And this was one of the big, most landowners didn't want to go to 65 inches. They wanted 60. But we looked at the data and said there's only like between 200 and 300 ATVs that are bigger than the 65 inches or 2,000 pounds in the state of Maine. There's 75,000 other ATVs that are below that. So we picked a number and said, then let's grandfather the old ones, and now we've got a cap. So you won't keep seeing the bigger and bigger and bigger machines. There are people that don't like the limit. And so we had a hearing today on a bill that would increase the weight to 2,400 pounds. So the law has only been in effect for 6 weeks, and we already have already have a proposal to change it. I testified I was on that committee. I testified in opposition. There's a lot of confusion. The people that were testifying in favor of it, I think, thought that they could not use their ATV if they had one that size, or there were farmers that said, well, what if I have to cross somebody's land to get to my next field, and that kind of stuff. I would say the committee, Carly, no, you didn't listen in, but based on the reaction of the committee, I don't believe there's any interest in changing the law. And it was Senator Jackson's bill. It was his constituent, Jim. But he also acknowledged, there's 2 sides to this, and there were 2 legislators from Aroostook County on the IF&W committee, and neither of them indicated support for the bill. So I didn't see anybody on the committee that was in favor. And so I'm guessing that bill will fail and the standard will stay. But, there is a legitimate issue about allowing working ATVs if they have to cross some piece of land, to get, and there's no reason we can't do something about a farmer that wants to cross somebody's land with an oversized ATV. Because if you operate on somebody else's land, it has to be registered in Maine. You can operate on your own and not registered, but if you cross onto somebody else's, it has to be registered. There's got to be a way to work out a few situations where a farmer crosses one farmer to get to the next field or something, and we can work that out. So But I don't think there's a stomach for changing the ATV statutes. Couple of quick things on taxation. That at tax, there's always an issue about the tree growth tax law program. This one is a very simple one. There's a recodification of the tree growth and current use taxations, which are farmland, open space, and working waterfront as the well as tree growth. There's a bill, Jim, it is, and the ATV bill was 1813. The bill I'm talking about now, tax is 1917. Most of the time in these current use taxation programs, you can transfer from one to another without penalty. But when they put in the working waterfront one, they forgot to put that in. So the bill really is designed to try to say you can transfer from working waterfront to some other program without a penalty, without into one of the other current use taxation programs. But while they were doing it, they changed the statute and reworded some things. And one of the things we got put in the bill, tree growth a few years ago, was that the town had to notify landowners when their recertification was coming up, and had to give them 185 days, and telling them if they didn't want to meet the standards of tree growth every 10 years, they could transfer to open space. Well, the rewrite took out any reference to open space, and it just said another program, another current use taxation program. So we suggested that language notifying landowners needs to state the open space program is available to them, because that's the one that 99% of the landowners would transfer into. The committee is in favor of that change. I talked to Maine Revenue today, and Maine Revenue will propose the change. Carla, they want our second option, which is open space or another program. And I told them that was acceptable. So but the tree growth tax law is open under that bill. So that's one we have to watch, because there's often a chance to somebody doesn't want to, well, while we're at it, let's change the tree growth tax law. Anything on that one? I don't see a stomach for changing tree growth, but it can happen in a second. LDE 1919 is an act to encourage job growth in the forest product sector. This is a bill, actually, this is a bill that would incentivize businesses that are forestry related to add employees and give them some benefits. We testified in favor of it. Some incentives to add jobs in the forest industry. This one would give anybody that adds at least one. There's a debate about whether 1 or 2 or 3, but I think the taxation committee is interested. It's a tax incentives. I think there is some interest in this bill. I think it will likely come out of committee in a positive fashion. I don't know what the physical note ought to be. It might not get passed through the process because there'll be a physical note on it, but that we testified in favor of just the concept of, this industry has an opportunity to grow. There's a lot of opportunities. Everything is made out of petroleum, can be made out of wood, and moving to wood-based materials is a worldwide growth place, and Maine has an opportunity to be involved. So I don't know what will happen there, but it's nice to see the legislature talking about ways to help the forest industry. So we wanted to be supportive of that. The only other one, and then I'm going to turn it over to Carla for that last one, Carla. But the governor, I think it's tomorrow. Jim may know this. Tomorrow, the governor is going to announce her budget. I think that's right. Releases her changes to the budget and budget recommendations. Right.
Her State of the State address is tomorrow night. I believe what I saw in the newspaper is the budget would likely be the next day.
Okay.
Or shortly after.
Okay.
And then we would take it up the following week in the legislature, most likely.
I expect she'll be speaking about some of her recommendations. I believe what will happen, and I've been sitting on this carbon group that the governor appointed. But I believe, but I do not know for sure, but I do believe that the governor will be recommending increased staffing of foresters within the Maine Forest Service to assist landowners, to smaller landowners, building up the number of foresters, and that could help those landowners with almost anything, including, if they're interested in carbon programs and things like that. So that's something that I actually had a chance to sit and talk with the governor about this, and I came away with the sense that she was very interested in this, and everything I've heard since then is likely going to be something like that, but I don't know for sure. But there's certainly a lot of support from a lot of different sides about that issue, so we can watch for that in her announcement, and then we'll be testifying at appropriations at some point, I'm sure, on her budget proposals. So, Jim, go ahead.
Well, one of the things that to watch for is there's this huge pot of money from the federal government that's, temporary, so to speak,
Right.
presumably. And I don't know if she touched on that, but a lot of programs say, oh yeah, we have plenty of money. We're going to give you money.
I know.
Because it's that money from last year or 2 years ago, whenever that was. And so did you talk about that? Are you worried about that?
Yeah, my understanding is, there's a fundamental need here, that isn't necessarily tied directly. I mean, it doesn't mean that these would be temporary jobs. I don't think the intention is these would be temporary. That one of the things that happened when the commissioner of the Agriculture, Conservation, Forestry department was the last commissioner confirmed, and it was after the original budget proposals, and so the department really didn't have a good chance for budget changes in the first 2 years, and so I think this is kind of catch up a little bit, frankly, in that department. And I will say for what it's worth, the administration has been very supportive of forestry issues, and we have the good fortune of the governor's legislative director is Tom Abello, and Tom was on this board, and his father is a member, but Tom is very accessible on any issue. So it's certainly, we've been, the administration has been very helpful on a lot of issues for us. So, yeah. Carla, I'm going to turn it. We got one more issue to talk about, and I'm going to turn over to Carla to talk about the next one.
Thank you. I think you've saved the best for last. The last one is about brown-tailed moths. So we're going to talk about LD 1929, which is an act to provide assistance to areas severely infested with brown-tailed moths. It's a pretty simple bill. It creates a pot of money at the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry of about $150,000 that could be accessed by municipalities and nonprofits to help with eradication and mitigation and educational issues around eradicating brown-tailed moths. It also creates 2 entomology-related positions within the department. We testified in favor of the bill. We felt that brown-tailed moths were not just a threat to public health, but also a threat to our forest health, and indicated that the department has been understaffed in the area of entomology, and that these positions are really needed to help not just with brown-tailed moth infestations, but infestations of other invasive pests as well. The committee voted the bill ought to pass yesterday.
Okay, does anybody have a question about any other issue related to the legislation, or frankly, any other issue that's burning that you want to bring up? So be happy to hear anything you want to talk about. I will say, I think the big fight will be the Sunday hunting fight. And if you care about this issue, watch for an alert from us, because it'll either be very, very quiet or very, very raucous. And not quite sure yet which one it will be. I also want to, it's great to have Carla on. Carla, you may want to, you might want to just give your quick background for folks that.
Sure. Yeah, went to the University of Maine at Orono and later went on to graduate from the University of Maine School of Law. I spent 5 years working in the governor's office for Governor Baldacci and have spent the last 11 years working in the state agency that regulates the financial industry in Maine as the Deputy Securities Administrator and General Counsel. Did a total change of pace and came to Maine Woodland Owners to pursue interests that more align with my personal interests. So I'm happy to be here.
Jeff, I see your video's up. Did you have something you wanted to ask or say?
Just to maybe a point of more of a technical point. My, I guess, understanding was that if something wasn't carried over from a previous session or some type of significant emergency, it wouldn't get brought up in this year as the shorter of the two sessions. But you're saying that even though there isn't a bill currently active, that they could bring up a Sunday hunting bill?
So what happened was the legislature passed a resolve. And so they said to the department, go out and do this poll and then come back with the results. And as part of that resolve, it authorized the Fish and Wildlife Committee to create a new bill if they choose to.
Okay, that's it.
Yes. So that's the way it goes. This is supposed to be the emergency session. I don't know, do they try to, I know the ATV bill today had an emergency preamble on it because it was a new bill in the idea of this is probably not going to get through. Not too many bills like that are going to get through with emergency is a 2/3 vote. So those are pretty hard to come by often. But so that's how that Sunday hunting issue remains. And then a couple of what happened was the legislature set a policy that said that each committee can only hold over from the first session to the second session a certain number of bills.
Mm-hmm.
So the way the committees got around it was to say, okay, we'll kill the bill off, but we'll turn it into a resolve. Basically saying the committee next session can report out a bill on this subject. So instead of holding it over, they created a resolve that then gives them a chance to create another bill. That's how they get around the self-imposed limits that they put on the number of bills that they held over. So it would have been easier to just hold the bills over, but that was the way the committees got around the idea of holding bills over to them in the second session.
Would it help for us now to lobby the members of the committee?
Yes, absolutely. Particularly if your legislator, the most effective thing you could do would be your individual legislator. I mean, if you know one of the IF&W committee members, certainly. I don't get irritated very often at the legislature, but I was irritated when I was challenged about whether I truly represented the interest and position of this organization. I had to bite my tongue on that one. It's the only time in doing this in 25 years, probably between my time at the Forest Service and that I've ever been challenged in such a way that am I representing, the views of the folks that I'm here for. But certainly, I'm looking at Jim and Richard and Tom and anybody else. But often, it certainly has direct influence on his local legislators, right? And then he certainly can reach out. He can certainly reach out to the committee members to make sure that people. This person that told me I wasn't allowed on his land told me I'm in southern Maine and there's nobody down here that's opposed to Sunday hunting. I'm there. I don't know where he's from. Everybody I talk to is in favor of it.
I would encourage everybody to make contact with your state legislator, senator and representative, because multiple contacts with a very simple message is very effective, I think. So I'm shocked that, Tom, you never got stuck with the accusation that your members didn't agree with you, because that was a favorite favorite method of doing business over in New Hampshire. We used to do it all the time. In fact, I probably did it myself a couple of times. So.
I got challenged one day by a person testifying that said, well, all I can say is figures lie and liars figure. And before I could be, just as that got out of that person's mouth, a legislator took that person testifying to task. I didn't have to say a thing. It was like, that is not going to stand. And they're looking at me like, don't worry, you don't have to say a word. We'll take care of this. So
I would have banged the gavel on that.
that is a committee. That is a cut your mic off right at that point and say that's unacceptable. So
Can I jump in and just say, I
Yes,
agree
please.
with everything you said, and Richard and Tom know, I mean, certainly in the Maine legislature, we don't hear from people a lot, as much as people might think.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to call on the phone and leave a message and ask them to call you. But, that's what people, and same with letters, emails. I mean, certainly the more direct your contact and the more energy and thought you have put into it, the better, the more effective you are with that, with your individual legislator. And be prepared to ask them to reach out to Maine Woodland where you're a member and that sort of thing. Because that way, Tom and Carla can be following this person who your interest, mention that you're a member of Maine Woodland and, you support what they're doing on your behalf on these bills and so on. It makes a difference if you know where they're coming from and who represents them, beyond just that one call or communication.
I can tell you, we don't do that many alerts, but and Richard Nass knows this story, but when I put out an alert a couple of years ago on the tree growth tax law program, and that evening and the morning, I'm walking in the State House and I couldn't get up the stairs before legislators were talking, saying, what in the world is going on in the tree growth tax law program? Why am I hearing from your members? And then the Senate Chair of Appropriations came over and said, what is going on? And said to me, make sure you keep me, informed of what's happening. And it didn't, I mean, our members was like that. And and I think they know is you get 2 or 3 calls and it's like, there's something going on here, right? I mean, you don't need 100 calls. 2 or 3 will trigger some thinking. So I would start with Jeff. I would start with your local legislators. If you don't know who they are, we can help you.
That's okay. I have pretty good relationship with my legislators, and I know at least one member of the committee as well, so I can reach out that way.
I think the other thing that I think you're going to see on Sunday hunting is the attempts have been in the past have always been in some form. I made a list for the committee of the number of things that have been tried. Like the first Sunday after the first Saturday, the afternoon, waterfowl hunting, north of the east-west highway, which wasn't even built, but that was one of them. And there's like 20 different options to get something. I expect there will be a proposal. The one I think is likely to come is Youth Day, because we have a Youth Day for hunting. You can hunt on the first Saturday of deer hunting season, only the youth with an adult. Well, if you ask the Fish and Wildlife Department, there are some real problems that go on those days that they don't talk about. But the idea is, well, why don't we have youth Sunday hunting? And that will encourage more kids to get into hunting and oh, by the way, we don't want to have them to have permission. They shouldn't have to get permission. The proposal, somebody said, well, the permission, they have to be able to tell a warden who the landowner is, but they don't have to have permission. I mean, we can go to the tax map and do that, but it's that kind of thinking. There'll probably be something. And as Richard said, I think Richard you had a bunch of, I know the questions, you were given a bunch of options. You were just saying, I don't want it, right? I don't want it. So anything else? I appreciate the opportunity that Zoom is not the way to run a legislature, however, I will say that. As you know, it's hard to express a lot of it, is just your eye contact and your reaction. A committee member, how many times does a committee member look over at you if you're sitting in the room and they go, and you can make you can make a gesture and they know exactly what you think. But you can't do it on Zoom because you're staring ahead. You can't really, you don't get the body language, you don't get the look, or they go like, meet me out in the hall, kind of thing. You can't do that. And that's unfortunate, I would say. Okay.
I'm sure most everybody knows who their state legislator and senator are, but if, in case you wanted to just be sure, we do have links to the web pages to find who your member is on our legislative action page as well. I just posted the link to that page, and it's an easy reference to find who you need to be reaching out to about things you care about.
And I see Peter Lawrence on the call. Peter probably was one of the early, the Sunday hunting debate goes back to when Peter was really actively involved with the State House for us, so I'm sure. So he's probably got some forestry. He's got some Sunday hunting stories too, I suppose. So. But good to see you, Peter. Okay. Anything else?
Peter wasn't mute. Peter was muted. It looks like he was going to say something. Do you want to unmute and tell us? Well, can you unmute, Peter?
No.
That's okay. We'll catch you again. But yes, we probably should gather. What did you say? It's been about 35 years of this, Tom, with Sunday hunting. So maybe there's a newsletter story on the history and all the stories that have come from this experience, decades of work. I'll have to, I intend to call Peter anyway to see if he wants to be interviewed. So maybe we can have a little story or two about Sunday hunting.
The hard part of it is, it's not an anti-hunting issue, and some people think it is. It is not. It's not. The people that testify in opposition are not generally people opposed to hunting. And just so you know, the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine will tell you that about 50, their polling of their own members is about 50-50 at best. So even the hunters in the state aren't pushing, and those would be, their membership would be pretty hardcore members, I would think. So. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Our
Oh,
next program is on the 24th with Jeff Williams on setting your objectives for your woodlot. So please join us. I'll be sending out an email announcing that, and check our website and check our newsletter. Thank you.
and Jim Boyle, let's catch up sometime and further update on some stuff. Okay, I'll send you a note. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye, everyone.